my name is Lynn Coram, and I'd like to welcome you to my newest production of Town Square. This is our first production, and so bear with us. But as guests, and I want this to be a debate talk show, and our guests are Meredith Angwin from Norwich? Wilder, Vermont.
Wilder, Vermont, just south of Norwich.
And Howard Schaefer from Enfield, New Hampshire, and Tony Bonella from Brattleboro. And my name is Lynn Coram, I'm from Brattleboro. And as our first topic for our first show, we've chosen to invite Meredith and Howard here and Tony to talk about Vermont Yankee, which is currently very much on everybody's minds, and try to find out, talk about nuclear power and see what nuclear power is doing and the role of nuclear power and all those kinds of things. Who knows where this discussion will go? We'll have fun with it. So, Meredith, if we could start with you, could you tell us a little bit about your background and so forth?
Yes. I have a master's degree and worked toward a PhD in mineral chemistry, and then I went into geothermal energy, where I was very happy to join the Electric Power Research Institute and be in the renewables group, renewable energy, because I am in favor of renewable energy. But after a while, I noticed that renewable projects are fought tooth and nail. It's very, very hard to get them put into place. Wind turbines, geothermal plants, biomass plants. And I moved into the nuclear group at that point, and I've been in nuclear energy ever since. Right now, I blog at Yes Vermont Yankee, and I also head the Ethan Allen Institute Energy Education Project.
Thank you very much. And Howard, give us your background, why you're interested in nuclear power and so forth.
I got into nuclear power courtesy of Uncle Sam. I was in Navy ROTC and became a submarine officer after I got out of college. And after almost 8 years in the Navy, I went to work for Basco Services in New York, who were the architect, engineer, and constructor for Vermont Yankee. And July 5th, 1970, I rolled into Brattleboro for the first time, as an adult anyway, to work as a startup engineer there. And just to be brief, my whole career has been in the nuclear power industry. Been at 7 plants like Vermont Yankee as a startup engineer or in support, and others. Retired in 2000, but my first public service was as a congressional fellow in Washington. So for the year 2001, beginning of a new administration of Congress, I was in Washington, D.C., sponsored by the American Nuclear Society through the American Association for the Advancement of Science and their Congressional Fellows Program.
So your background is not only hands-on in the industry, but also into politics, so you've dabbled in both.
Yes, and actually starting when I was here as a startup engineer for Vermont Yankee, there were interveners in the hearings, and I became interested in the question of, am I doing the right thing? Are these people who are intervening correct? And I pursued that all along, and when I was in Massachusetts working for the Yankee organization supporting Vermont Yankee and other plants, I had a nighttime job as a public speaker and debater and in politics, and first real taste of politics and political action was in 1988 when there was a referendum on the ballot to shut down the 2 nuclear power plants in Massachusetts. And the companies got organized, and I had a significant role through the company with community liaison volunteers, and the referendum was defeated. So I've been pursuing this question of the great nuclear debate in public in parallel to my technical career.
And I would think it would be very fair. I wonder, you have gone in, you start out in nuclear, and then you went back and said, am I doing the right thing?
Yes.
And researched it and come out on the other end supportive of nuclear.
Oh, absolutely, because for every technical argument that is raised by the opponents, I have not only the experience and the education, but the ability to go back into plants, into companies, and find out what the truth is. And all the technical arguments are not right, overblown, or they've made a completely unreasonable risk versus benefit judgment, particularly comparing nuclear power to perfection.
Yeah.
If we did that with any other technology, we wouldn't be flying, we wouldn't be driving, we wouldn't be doing a lot of things. But Congress made that comparison and has continued to make it through all technologies, and has, of course, kept the nuclear power program.
And Mr. Vanella?
I have over 31 years of nuclear power experience. I started back in 1978, August of 1978. I came here to Vermont Yankee as a contractor in November of 1988, and I've been here ever since. I was only supposed to be here for 2 or 3 weeks. Fell in love with Vermont, fell in love with Vermont Yankee and the employees and what we represent. It is a safe, legal, and efficient plant, and met a lot of friends. And it's one of the best operating plants in the industry. I've been around.
And that's not just you saying that. It's been rated such?
Yes, correct. It has been rated such as there's 103 nuclear power plants in the United States, and our equipment liability has been rated, I think, 98 out of 103.
Okay. But what I'd like to start on first off is the worldview of nuclear. What are other countries doing? How is it regulated worldwide? How does the NRC fit in with the international atomic field? So tell us what you know about that kind of stuff.
I have one comment, and that is the world is going to nuclear. There are many, I don't know, 70 plants under construction, 60 plants under construction.
As we speak?
As we speak, yeah, overseas as we speak. I think one of the most interesting sets of places going to nuclear is the Arab countries. United Arab Emirates is building a nuclear plant. They have a lot of sunshine there, but they cannot run a 24/7 economy on sunshine. They're putting in solar, but they're not trying to run on solar. They have no intention of burning up all their oil to make their own electricity when they can sell it to us at a premium.
And when you burn oil, your environment, your air is not as clean.
Yes.
Would that be one of their...
It probably is one of their reasons, but in all honesty, I think that they just say oil is our resource. We are going to sell it for money that we can buy other things with. And then they're putting in a nuclear plant to make power for their country. They did reject coal on the basis that they didn't want to barge in coal and really mess up their air quality.
Yeah,
What else?
I'm very glad you mentioned that, Meredith. There's 32 countries by count from this year's total from American Nuclear Society's magazine, Nuclear News. Every year they do a status of all the plants in the world. 32 countries, U.S. is one of them, that have nuclear power programs. And U.S. is falling behind because of not building plants. And
So all our plants are at least almost 40 years old.
well, we know we have some that were finished after that and are newer, but nothing. We just have a few that are just getting started on construction. But take China, for instance. They've got many which are far along, and they're going hell-bent for leather because they know what their air quality problems are, and they know what they had to do to clean up the air for the Olympics. And they know they have to get off of coal. And they've examined all the alternatives, and the best by far for them and for India and for these other countries is nuclear.
Well, let's just talk to when a country puts up if a country to decide to go with wind or solar, and it's not considered baseload because it's intermittent power. What kind of a facility would they match a wind and solar units with? Coal or a nuclear? I don't think those...
No, those don't work well. They're
Okay.
they're both base load. That is, they're plants that are sort of hard to run them up and down and output quickly. In general, wind and solar match well with either hydro plants, which can be turned on and off quickly, or a relatively inefficient kind of gas-fired plant. That is a regular gas plant as opposed to a combined cycle gas
Yeah, because
plant.
once coal gets going, you want to keep that fire going.
Right.
And once nuclear gets going, you don't want to zip them off. They're not easily off and on with the off-on switch.
Well, they go off easily.
They go off
They
easily.
take a long time to get back up.
Yeah.
But I need to point out that is by design, not for economical operation because of the upfront expense of building nuclear power plants. Quite obviously, naval nuclear power plants can maneuver quite quickly. So
Well,
it's not limited by being nuclear, it's limited by what it's designed for economics.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that because the nuclear industry gets confused, I think, A, with the bomb, and B, then I understand these submarines will the nukes on the subs, which run around the world, are put in place and not touched for 20 years. I mean, their maintenance is much less, but you can correct me, as compared to a nuclear plant. So how do all these things in our mind get mixed up, and what do we need to understand about them?
Well, understand that there are differences, and you always have to go back to basic science. And in the case of naval nuclear power plants, they have a completely different mission. They do not run full bore all the time, as electric generating plants do. So during a year, they burn a lot less fuel. But their economics are much different too, so they can use much more expensive, that is highly enriched fuel, in order to last for 20 years. For instance, the aircraft carriers only need refueling once every 20 years. But,
Okay, that's the part that I had heard.
Yeah.
So it's so good to try to straighten these things out.
but they can do that by the fact that, first of all, they don't run at full power all the time, and second of all, they have much more expensive fuel. But that beats the competition, particularly if you're a submarine. You know, there's no competition between nuclear and conventional submarines.
Yes, yeah. Go ahead.
One of the things I would like to say is that, here in the United States, we started nuclear power, okay? And we've educated a lot of other countries, and they're taking the lead on nuclear power. France is 80-90% of their countries run on nuclear power.
That they get all their
They
electric
perfected it. They perfected it, and they've got 80-90% of your country running nuclear power. Now, that is amazing to me, that one country will take that much pride in running a nuclear power plant and running it efficient.
Well, France, I think, I've heard it was up against the walls. Their air was filthy.
Yep.
And they just grasped onto this new technology in a different way.
Well, they did. We had a representative from the French embassy talking to the American Nuclear Society Northeastern section here a few years ago, and he related this story to us just as you said. At the oil crisis in 1970s, the government took a hard look at their situation and basically concluded they had no coal, they had no oil, so they had no choice. So it was a government mandated and pushed program. Of course, there, the one utility in the country is owned by the federal government.
So that was
they,
easier.
So they can pursue a uniform national program. And they have gone ahead there, as Tony said, 80% nuclear, and making money hand over fist, selling power to Italy and other places that we're not so enthusiastic about nuclear power.
And France has gone the next step. They also,
They recycle. I was pleased that as a blogger, they invited a bunch of pro-nuclear bloggers to visit their recycling facilities in France, and I was one of them. And so they ship all their spent fuel to one place where it's stored in one spent fuel pool at one place, and then it's taken from there and cut up into smaller sections that can be basically dissolved, and the new fuel is made from that. It's called MOX fuel, mixed oxide, because it has both uranium and plutonium as fuel in it. And it was all very, very impressive to visit and to see they're actually doing this, and they're actually coming in with trucks with the spent fuel and sending out MOX fuel, which they sell all over the world, actually. MOX fuel has been in use since the 70s.
and MOX fuel, that's a term I'm not familiar with.
MOX means mixed oxide, which means that it's a mixture of uranium and plutonium as the fissile material. And as I say, it sounds very exotic to us in the United States because we don't use it, but it has been used in Europe since the 70s. It's not really, the new technology.
Okay. What all this says to me is that other countries are marching ahead. What do you think is the United States, and it's clearly being left behind? What our jobs? You have many friends, Tony, who are overseas working.
That's correct, I do. Now, one of the things here in the United States that we're starting to build nuclear power plant. Nuclear power plants are starting to come back in the United States.
We have two going on supposedly in Georgia.
That's correct, and there's supposed to be starting one in Crystal River nuclear power plant down that area, and there's some more in the works. And we just a lot more red tape that we go through here in the United States to start a nuclear power plant and how to get it started. And it's important to understand that, we need reusable energy, and nuclear power is one of the best energies you can have, as far as I'm concerned. And we are striving to go in the right direction. We just need to step it up a notch and try to catch up to like France and stuff and perfect it. And there's hiccups along the way, and we understand that, but it's mostly minor stuff. It's nothing that major.
Yeah, and just to add into what Tony, and of course, Vermont's a perfect example to what's slowed down nuclear power in this country. It's a political opposition and a great public debate.
And of course,
And that's had a big effect in this country.
Well, I think it's had a huge effect because I have read, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me, that when nuclear power first became the idea in the 50s, that the government wanted to have 1,000 plants in the country.
That's correct.
And that would have, you just think, if 100 plants provide 20% of our electric needs at this juncture, 1,000 plants we would have been selling power.
Yes.
They were looking at probably smaller plants, but I think the key point there that you've touched on, very important and still important today, is that Congress was enthusiastic about the nuclear power program, and still is, as a replacement for coal, because of their concerns over black lung disease and strip mining and coal mine accidents in the 50s. Global warming, no one was talking about that in the 1950s, but Congress sure knew about black lung and strip mining. So it was replacement for coal, which is still true around the world. China's a perfect example.
Oh yes, bad air pollution.
I wanted to comment that there was a phase in the history of the Sierra Club where they were pro-nuclear. Basically, there was a lot of dam building going on in the West, and they were flooding places like Glen Canyon and so forth. I don't know if you've ever seen that beautiful book, Remember These Things Lost, about Glen Canyon Dam. And the Sierra Club had a policy of atoms, not dams, because the nuclear plant has a small footprint, a nuclear plant doesn't flood a beautiful valley, and so forth. Then they changed that policy. I don't know why, but they did.
Well, my understanding is that George Aiken, our esteemed senator from this state for many, many years, was very much in favor of nuclear for that exact reason, because the dams coming down the Connecticut, flooded a lot of great farmland.
Yes.
So,
Well, a lot of renewable resources take up a lot of space, which is something that people don't like to acknowledge. But if you look at the first renewable, which is the large dams, they flood a lot of farmland. And if you go on to talking about wind turbines, well, you're going to have to put them up on ridges, and you're going to have roads to them and so forth. And there's a book, David McCabe from England wrote a book called Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air, in which he tries to figure out exactly how much land would it take if we decided to go all renewables, and you wouldn't be able to do anything else in England.
Yeah, that can seem like a shell game to some people until you look back, at least I think, at the basic science. And if you ask the question, well, how much energy do you get from wind and water and burning and nuclear power, and you look at it on an individual atom or molecule basis, and you give wind and water a value of 1, then burning gives you 1,000, and splitting atoms gives you 1 billion. So the 1,000,000 to 1 difference on a per atom basis between splitting atoms and water and wind down the road translates to less stuff dug out of the ground and a heck of a lot less hardware that you have to build. That's the basis for it. So it's not a shell game. Say, well, nuclear looks pretty good because it uses less land, there's less mining, and so forth.
yeah, and if I have heard that if we, maybe you know this answer, Tony, if we just got into processing, reprocessing, and recycling our fuel in this country, we wouldn't have to dig any more uranium for 200 years. So, something was thrown out like that. Would you know anything about that, Meredith?
Well, it would certainly be for quite a long time, because we could use the MOX fuel for quite a long time. To not use any more uranium for hundreds of years, I think we would have to go to slightly different kinds of reactors, or the thorium cycle, and so forth.
But uranium is not a scarce.
No, it's not scarce at all. And And there's also, you don't have to use straight uranium, you can use uranium-thorium blends, and thorium is very, very abundant, which is why India is going to thorium reactors. And once again, it sounds very exotic when I talk about, oh, thorium. Well, the first reactor in this country ran on thorium for a while just to test it out, and you know more about that than I do, in the 70s. So it's not, as I say, we are behind in what we're using, but a lot of these things are not really like far-out research projects. They're used in other parts of the world, in India, MOX fuel all over Europe, etc.
And so, but one of the things I was just sitting here and not a scientist and not involved like you people are, and my personality trusts scientists to be the experts and to have the answers. And since the nuclear industry has had no accidents, and no one's been hurt in this area compared to the others, where we hear blow-ups a lot, more than we'd hope to, I trust that, but other people don't. And so these names are not, sound, again, as you said, exotic or scary or whatever. How do we get around that corner? The safety issue has got to be number one.
I think by keeping the lines of communication open and keep on trying to explain things in terms people can understand. For instance, Meredith said thorium. Well, what is that? Well, thorium is a metal, just the way uranium is and gold and so on. You dig it out of the ground. It's not something that, well, some may have come from outer space, but it's
in a petri dish. Right?
No, it's a normal thing, okay? And it has some industrial uses, including coating those little cotton mantles, for instance, in camping lanterns. So it's something we know about and we know how to use. Turns out it's a good source of making.
But never having heard that, you think, oh my gosh, what's this?
It's something, well, and that is the problem, that there's a lot of these things in our industrial technology that are not commonly discussed in the public because they're not of everyday concerns until suddenly people hear about a nuclear power plant or something else.
Well, let's go. Tritium has been a big issue. Tony, tritium is, what are its other applications in our lives? That we
If I may, this is an exit sign which I bought over the internet with my credit card, as anybody can do, and it comes this way with a little sheet from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission which says, don't dispose of this in a landfill. And I'll stick with one unit of measure. The water that has leaked from Vermont Yankee had up to 1 million picocuries per liter. This sign contains over 7 trillion picocuries. So there's more tritium in this sign than in all the water that leaked from Vermont Yankee.
And you're holding it in your lap.
It's perfectly safe to do.
Well, now tritium, what kind, why is that not radiating into your body and spreading all over the county?
Because the radiation from tritium is beta, or electrons, which doesn't pass through the glass of the tubes. These tubes in here with little fluorescent powder are really little fluorescent lights. And the electrons are making the fluorescent powder grow just the way the electrons from the air make normal fluorescent lights grow.
Tony, if you could tell us the different places tritium bounces around our existence that we don't even know about.
Well, let's talk about Canada. Canada has a couple nuclear power plants up there, and their release criteria is a lot higher than ours. Our criteria is a lot lower. It's set a lot lower.
So we allow much less into the environment than they do in Canada.
Absolutely, and they're I believe we have released less than 1 curie so far, and they've on their report. I got a report here, right? You can get online, and you go to the Tritium Release and Dose Consequences in Canada of 2006, Part 1 of Tritium Studies Project. And there's really a lot of good information here. You can get a lot out of it. Mm-hmm. And their release criteria is a lot higher than ours are. Now, and we are self-identifying. We find something. If it's below the limits, we still report it.
Okay. So even if you don't have to report it because it's just so small of an amount, the government doesn't require it, Vermont Yankee reports it.
We self-identify.
Why do you do that?
Well, it's a safety aspect.
Safety aspect.
Safety is
Okay.
#1 rule of Vermont Yankee, and that's our biggest criteria. Safety's got to be our #1 priority on how we run safe, legal, and efficient nuclear power. Like I said, I have over 30 years of experience. I don't have a degree like these ladies and gentlemen over here, but I have what's called OJT, on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And it's something that is really good when you work with hands-on on what happens in the everyday process that we do at Vermont Yankee. The truth fact that this is what we can buy a product right off the street, right off online.
The tritium is really the hottest
Yes.
thing that we talked about. You say you call it a beta ray.
Yeah, that's an electron.
Electron. Okay, that means if I got it on my skin, would that be a problem?
No, because of it's electrically charged, it won't go through your skin. It won't go through a piece of paper.
Okay.
So there's different kinds of radioactivity and radioactive rays or emissions and particles. And
But in the public's mind, they're all lumped together,
Well,
and
that's-
that means bad.
well, that's it's of course more complicated than that. And for each type of radiation, we know the science in depth after 100 years working on it, more than 100 years since Madame Curie. We know the kind of shielding, and we know what the safe amounts are in your body and in the environment. And this has all been tabulated over 50 years ago. And that's the rule book we run by. And for instance, if you're drinking water with the maximum amount of tritium in it, and it exists naturally in the water, so naturally coming down the Connecticut River, there's tritium in there already. And your drinking amount that the EPA uses for a standard for drinking water, you're getting 20 times more than that in one day by eating a banana. You know, from the natural radioactive potassium in bananas. So radioactivity is a natural part of our environment. We have evolved to live with it and prosper with it. And of course, too much is bad for you. Too much water is bad for you. Too much fire is bad for you.
Yeah.
But these are all natural substances which we have learned to use safely.
And exist in our environment, we don't even know about it.
Yeah.
No,
Or
at
aware.
one point, there was a woman who was very upset, and she said, I bet you wouldn't drink any of that tritiated water they found. And I said, well, sure I would if you'll eat a banana. And she didn't know what I was talking about, but there is actually a stronger beta particles in the banana. That is, the banana, potassium in the banana has more energetic beta particles than the tritium does. Tritium has extremely weak beta particles. It's one of the least aggressive types of particles you can imagine. But when I have a blog, you know, when I began blogging about this, and then I thought, oh my gosh, all these people are going to read my blog and try and avoid potassium-containing foods, which would be really, really bad for them because we need potassium in our body, and our bones have a significant amount of potassium, and actually our bones irradiate us with potassium. And I thought, okay, so I wrote a whole blog saying, no, don't stop eating potassium, it's good for
I
you.
think what we're hitting on too is just the understanding of science and really knowing what we're talking about. And it gets twisted because people get scared. But we really have to go back to what is good science.
Well, that's right. And I think what has happened, particularly here in Vermont, is people with a political agenda have exploited the lack of knowledge and people's fear of radiation. For instance, the tritium leaks at Vermont Yankee, to push their political agenda.
Thank you for watching. My name is Lynn Coram. This has been Town Square, and I've been joined by guests Meredith Angwin, Howard Schaefer, and Tony Vanello. And we hope to see you on our next show.